of dollars in legal fees that Rudy Giuliani is now staring down, and the desperate attempts that he has made to get former President Donald Trump to cover them. With his attorney in tow, I am told that Rudy Giuliani traveled to Mar-a-Lago in late April on a mission to make a personal appeal to Trump to pay his legal bills. By going in person, Giuliani and that lawyer, Robert Costello, believed that they could help explain face-to-face why Trump needed to assist his attorney with those ballooning legal bills. They argued that really it was in Trump's best interest to do so. But apparently it fell on deaf ears. Trump is notoriously strict about digging into his own coffers. He did not seem very interested, I'm told, in covering everything that Giuliani and Costello wanted. One source says that he verbally agreed to help, but he didn't commit to any specific amount or timeline. Another source tells me that Trump really only agreed to pay a small fee from a data vendor that was hosting Giuliani's records. I'm told that was about $340,000, while in total, Giuliani's legal fees are in the seven-figure range. Giuliani's trip to Mar-a-Lago has not been previously reported. We're telling you about it first here on The Source tonight, but it does indicate the level of financial stress that he has been facing for months now. Some people in Trump's inner circle were actually surprised by Trump's unwillingness to pay for Giuliani's bills, given he could find himself under intense pressure to cooperate with federal and now state prosecutors who have charged Trump. Giuliani already sat down voluntarily with Jack Smith's team this summer in two back-to-back sessions. He's now a co-defendant in the election interference case in Georgia. He is facing 13 criminal charges, like Trump, and potentially serious prison time. It's not out of character for Trump to not want to pay legal fees. This is something we have heard from many of his attorneys in the past, including his former attorney, Michael Cohen, when I sat down with him last month.
Now, history repeats itself. One thing that we know for certain is that Donald does not pay legal fees. Donald doesn't pay fees at all. There's a pattern to what he does. He will pay a little bit, fall behind, pay a little more, fall bigger behind.
I'm joined now by former White House counsel under President Nixon, John Dean. John, good to see you again. I mean, what do you make when you hear that Rudy Giuliani is going to Mar-a-Lago, making this desperate plea, trying to get Trump to pay for his legal fees, and Trump not really reciprocating on most of that?
I think that Trump is aware that during Watergate, for example, the payment of legal fees got lawyers in a lot of trouble, as did joint defense agreements. The fact that he's not paying, though, is a pattern of this man. As Michael just said, he just doesn't like to pay his bills. So he will have people come after him to get the fees. He had an agreement with Michael, and Michael had to go to court to get his fees paid. So, Caitlin, there's no surprise here. And Trump, I think, is willing to tough it out. He doesn't think Rudy will flip.
But that is a concern. I mean, I think people, the Michael Cohen effect, people have said that Trump has kind of changed his tactics there because of a concern of it turning into a Michael Cohen situation, potentially.
I doubt that Rudy will. Rudy knows the inner workings of the system better than most as a former U.S. attorney from the Southern District of New York. He knows particularly the RICO law. He will try to poke holes. He will think he can prevail. He certainly at the motion stage, the early stage of this proceeding, is not likely to flip. It's only if the government of Georgia can overwhelm him and he realizes he's going to go down and maybe he can save himself some years by cracking a deal.
I sat down with Bill Barr, Trump's former attorney general, of course, as you know, the other week, and he had this to say about what he has seen, he says, happen to people who were in Trump's orbit.
He leaves in his wake ruined lives like this, the people who went up to Capitol Hill, these individuals, many of the people who served him in government that got sucked into things, and he just leaves all this carnage in his wake.
Do you think he cares about that?
No, he doesn't care about that. Loyalty is a one-way street for him.
Do you think Rudy Giuliani winds up as more carnage here if he hasn't already in some people's view?
I think he will. I think he's in deep trouble. The government's case, it looks like it's overwhelming. His federal issues have not been resolved. Trump could not pardon him in Georgia if Indeed, he is convicted in Georgia. I don't think Trump is going to make it back to the White House. I think people are starting to get a glimmer of what that could be, and they don't want it. Maybe more Republicans will do that before the primary vote. I don't know. They're slow learners, apparently. So I think Rudy is going to get destroyed by this. It's sad, but true.
I mean, yeah, what is he, if he is as out of money as his attorney was arguing in court today that he is? I mean, the entire reason his attorney was in court today was arguing that he could not pay part of what he is being ordered to pay as part of that Smartmatic lawsuit. I mean, what does he do in that situation? Does he represent himself? I mean, what options does Rudy Giuliani have at that point?
Well, he can get a court-appointed lawyer at some stage. Representing yourself is the worst option because anyone who represents himself is likely to make bad decisions about that representation. I think Rudy is likely to go into Chapter 11 or bankruptcy of some sort. I understand his apartment is on the market. It could raise several $1 million, but he probably has a lot of debt he has to handle immediately as well. So I think bankruptcy is a potential, and maybe a court-appointed attorney.
I mean, that would be kind of remarkable in the worst way. If someone who was, once known as America's mayor, the role that he had after 9/11 is then potentially, as you predict could happen, being represented by a court-appointed attorney and filing bankruptcy to cover his legal fees.
It has a Shakespearean element about it, although I don't really think of Shakespeare when I look at Rudy and some of the news clips of him recently. It does have that kind of tragic tale that is being told in front of us. So we'll have to all watch, and no one wishes him ill, but he's gotten himself where he is.
What do you make of what we saw out of Georgia overall? The district attorney there saying that she wants to have a March trial date. She's actually asking for March 4th of a trial date. I mean, whether or not that actually happens remains to be seen. But does that seem realistic, just given the makeup of this case, how complex it is, the fact that there are 19 co-defendants here?
I think what's going to slow down the Georgia case is the others will file a kind of motion that Mark Meadows has filed to remove the case to federal court. While the state proceedings will continue, it will bog things down a bit. And I don't really believe, from my talk with lawyers who've really studied this body of law about removal, that they are going to remove the case to federal court. And if they do, it's still the same Georgia prosecutors, and the calendar could be even clearer at the federal level. I don't know. It's just a different jury pool, broader, wider. So that's what's likely to slow it down, Caitlin, is the removal proceedings.
So you don't think that they're likely going to be able to get it moved from a state proceeding to, as Mark Meadows is doing, but also we are told by sources that Trump is also likely to do. You don't think that's likely?
I don't. It's hard to envision this as official behavior of any of the people. When you read that indictment, you read what is being included. Mark Meadows was not just setting up meetings. He was not arranging telephone calls. That's done by secretaries, staffers, White House operators. He's in the thick of this, and as the indictment brings out, is much different than his motion. So I don't think they're going to prevail. And many of them don't even have federal standing to remove. Those who are the fake electors, for example, and it's just limited to those who were in federal office when these events happened.
Yeah, I mean, and to bring this full circle, Rudy Giuliani is also saying he's going to potentially make that argument, though. I mean, he obviously did not work for the federal government. We'll see what the courts decide. John Dean, thank you for your perspective tonight.